Good morning on the West Coast and good afternoon on the East Coast. Today is Wednesday, January 25th, and it's a beautiful day to have a webinar. I'm John Yerrington, CEO of the Partnership and Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to promoting, protecting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and direct response advertising industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI team, it's my pleasure to welcome you back for yet another fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. Today we're joined by an incredible guest, Mr. Data Automation himself, Cordy DePasquale from Premium Media 360, and we'll be discussing the state of data automation as it relates to how we buy and sell advertising today. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question or two, we encourage you to do so. Please use the questions tab located in the control panel. Also, please note, you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we will hold all replies to the end of our discussion. Alrighty, folks. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. He never wears a watch because time is always on his side. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is the Vice President of New Business Development at Modern Postcard, located in Carlsbad, California. He also has a day job. Also, when he's not doing his day job, he teaches brand strategies at UCSD Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for all that you do, and take it away.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that introduction. Cordy, welcome to your first Take 20. It's fantastic to have you here. For everybody out there, this is season 3 of Take 20, and now I think we're on episode 58. As a note, as a big Pittsburgh Steeler fan, because I grew up in the city, it's Jack Lambert's jersey number. So welcome to Jack Lambert Day here at Take 20.
Awesome.
So Cody, we're going to talk about data automation, and what we've seen and what we know and what you live with is the bids and purchases and programmatic displays and more are just being managed by automated system. Also, artificial intelligence will probably be added to the mix to aid departments to predict and choose which tactics and slots and openings work best. Modeling derived from previous purchase histories and web browsing intent can create new ways to look at data and in segmentation. So really, from all spheres and all ecosystems, the automation of data and how it can help bring insights to a team is blossoming. However, we still believe or hope that it's still the job of real people to turn data into information that can help tell a true story that helps businesses inform their strategy and just to tell the story of what the data is actually showing. Even if it's informed and driven by automation, there might be some human elements still that's going to be involved. So I'm really excited to talk to you about the space. And I guess the question that I have for you first is, what is that big problem that data automation is solving for, especially in the performance marketing industry?
I think it's a great question, and thanks for that intro, Chris and John. The one thing that we've recognized is, a lot of the mundane needs to be automated. We're hiring folks out of school, entry level and up, that, to do things, in a day-to-day job like manage an account, a line of business, something like that. And oftentimes we're throwing these tasks at them that can be automated, by way of, as we were talking earlier, artificial intelligence, scheduling systems, things that actually can just be configured and triggered on a, sight unseen basis. And so we took the approach, right, like at Premium Media, we said, all right, well, what's the one area that we can automate best to start and kind of prove that we know what we're doing in this space. So we partnered with the TIP initiative, TV interface practices, to work on airtimes distribution. And what we found was, there's some level of distribution capability with the broadcasters and the networks, but it wasn't always the right fit for the agencies. And so, you look at direct response, we're all used to dealing with post logs, right, and getting that stuff married up with buys and responses. But general marketers were tasked with that same responsibility, and they don't do this. That's not their day job. So we had to make it really easy for them to get in, and in the process, take what we knew about direct response and lend that to them. So our airtimes automation, we integrate with Wide Orbit, with Operative. We send the data right out of their systems straight into the agency's hands in whatever format they need. Core is a partner of ours, so we hit their formats no problem. We have a lot of bespoke systems that were built by homegrown agencies and whatnot. That we love those because there's always nuances to that, and they're very familiar with the pains of growing automation. So
Sure.
yeah, I think that
So
was a good
not only
success.
that's wonderful, because not only does it minimize some of these mundane administrative tasks, right, which you want to actually free those up from your talent so that they can actually work on the talent and the thought work. But I also imagine that it helps with some of the immediacy issues that marketing and advertising talent now are expecting because of their exposure to digital marketing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, you're looking at digital performing at a speed that broadcast, hasn't seen or isn't used to seeing in terms of, what they do in their jobs. I mean, you're booking a campaign up front, maybe you're doing some scatter buys along the way, but you're typically buying on metrics that are measured and currency in market versus buying on, did the cash register ring? Did someone go and fill out a lead form? Where we understand how that works and the immediacy and the need for it, they're just not used to it. And they're used to looking at it like, oh, well, 30 days plus after the end of the campaign, I'll have a post. And that's not going to be the norm going forward, right?
Sure. So I guess one of the questions that I would have is, we saw digital marketing advance quickly, and now it's kind of a little bit of commonplace of the stuff that happened before. At the outset, though, it was new. So for you,
Right.
what are you most surprised by in terms of the change, especially on the broadcast side, when it comes to this type of automation?
I think the thing that I'm most surprised by is, where the audience data is going. I think, the start at alternate currencies to the tried and true, we'll call it Nielsen of the world, who's, a wonderful partner of ours.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got some startups in the space, like the one that I'll focus on is VideoAmp. They do a really great job of going across the media types, looking at video, connected television, and broadcast television to find the sweet spot of not just the frequency and how many ads do I need to run based on the models that they produce and the audiences that they have access to, but also outcomes. Can you lend that to first-party data from an advertiser to see, hey, did your cash register ring?
Mm-hmm.
Are those things working? And for me, that's great because it builds up into this, reach frequency model that, we're not throwing our money at the wind, and we never are, but, advertisers will say that. It's like, well, how do I know my dollars are being spent properly and efficiently? That type of data and that type of immediacy gets you to a place where you're not wasting
Right.
against each media type.
Yeah, it's interesting about that in terms of the wasted touch. I think gone are the days where I'm sure everybody in the audience has seen some episodes of Mad Men, I'm sure, right? And the adage was, I know 50% of my spend is wasted. I just don't know which one. One of my favorite moments of Mad Men is they just pitch Heineken, they win Heineken, and the guy from Heineken is like, yeah, well, man, I hope this works. And Don Draper says, no, we won't know. And he was like, when his eyeballs fell out of his head, he goes, no, I'm joking, it'll be fine.
Exactly.
But that can't cut it anymore, especially with the new technologies. And you mentioned VideoAmp, and I thought that was interesting because it seems, and I don't know, but it seems like these independent companies now that are able to stitch together different data sets perhaps creates an opportunity for new businesses to disrupt the space. What do you
Absolutely. I think, when I talk to broadcasters, and by the way, they all have a similar strategy. It's like, hey, let's tag our inventory with the stuff that works against that VideoAmp data or that 4C data or whatever data that they're going to, co-op with. And the first party stuff, you can go across the board and look at anonymized, user profiles and come up with some really great stuff off of credit card usage and all of that. When you marry that all together and you stitch it together in a way where you're not just affecting your digital campaign, but you're lending some guidance to your TV, your broadcast campaigns, that's huge. That's tremendous. And that's really where the industry needs to be and needs to go. We feel Premium Media 360 that, our data automation helps us to get there, especially on the broadcast side and
Sure.
soon to be on the connected television side, as we're working that through.
So what's interesting, what you're talking about, Cordy, is that the automation is almost within these tactics and these spaces, but it takes a human to step back in either, whether you call it a quarterback or call it the maestro of an orchestra, conductor, however it is, that's to where I think the human intuition and experience is most valuable.
Absolutely. Someone has to turn those dials and levers and, make the thing work. You've got to go in and configure it with, what are your inputs? What's your expectation? What's the outcome, that end result that you're expecting to see? And let's configure everything for that optimizer, for all of that data to make sense. And, what I found, I've designed half a dozen optimizers in my career. Most users will say, well, I don't trust the machine. So, it might give me some outcome that I don't like and I want to tweak it. It's like, great. We'll give you the ability to tweak it. No problem.
Sure. So
right?
it's an interesting analogy. It's like you're the pilot of this really sophisticated plane, but you're the one that's actually changing the framework of the dashboard and the configurations and the dials.
Exactly.
So I guess one question that I would have is, being the human being and being the conductor, the pilot, you've got the set of data, but off over there is a new set of data coming from artificially intelligent driven content. We touched briefly on this on another episode where I've gone into ChatGPT to write some email and social media content. I've gone into DALL-E to create some imagery, right? There's no doubt in my mind that by the end of the year, entire social media campaigns or digital ads can be constructed completely with artificial intelligence, given the guidance of the human being, perhaps. How do you see then, as someone in this space, trying to stitch together these different ecosystems and these different kinds of automation?
I think that where I go to on that is, if the industry agrees on a common currency, or, we move to impression based, we get there much more quickly. And that's, look, there's industry bodies outside of our, direction that will have to come together and really work that through. I mean, it's broadcast, it's digital. So, you'd expect the 4As and the IAB and, other bodies like the TVB to come together and define what an impression is across the board. And then develop methodologies, because I think, when I was talking about reach frequency, Erwin Gottlieb had said to me once, he's like, it's great that you can do all this stuff, and it's not just taking a broadcast commercial and altering it or trimming it down and making it work for the digital, outcomes that you expect to receive. It's those creatives have to be tied together in a really tight way in order for you to make the claim that they're performing optimally and against a common audience set or audience methodology, right? Those are big challenges that are ahead, and it's a lot of opportunity, man. There's so many cool things that we can do to make that happen from a technology perspective, right? So I'm chomping at the bit for that kind of thing, because that makes my systems pop, right?
That's right. And also, too, I would think that you had mentioned before about connecting to cash registers and maybe IRI receipts. And even though you might use some of that anonymous data, to me, though, it also touches on that big A word of attribution, right? Where there's some understanding of the automation. Not only does it optimize the delivery and the output, but you can model it so that it optimizes response and true metrics of attribution to those responses.
Exactly. Yeah, and refine the models. I think, with attribution, having worked on it when I was at Core and at Mediaocean, attribution's kind of, it's magical, right? There's a lot of ways to carve out and say, okay, in this response pool, these responses go to this network or that network and another network. We added in digital, and it became a whole mess of more response data to deal with.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of records coming in on really big campaigns. And it's like, how do you take that data and refine the models over time, because it's just completely saturated. You could be on 210 markets, 5 stations deep, every single cable network and digital, and it's like, where do those responses go?
Right.
At that point, you're like, okay, wait a second. I now have to look at other sets and sources of information to make that stuff work, right? And so we were able to do that when I was at Core. And also, again, when I left and went to Mediaocean, we did a similar thing. It's doable, is what I'm saying. It's not
Sure.
impossible, right?
Well, and I think what I've been reading about and so surprised by is I believe now that most of these things are going to be doable. When I look at just the New York Times article about AI, just briefly, there was an article on December 5th, and then suddenly it's December 17th, and then December 20th, and then January 1st, and January 6th, and January 11th, and all of these, it was happening so quickly. Um,
Right.
and I think that with this space in particular, that is so dependent upon proving delivery and proving performance to advertisers and agencies because they're spending money, and now the expectation is that I should be able to see what my money did.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just proving that the outcomes of the response result. It's also making sure or having that insurance that your campaign is running properly. I mean, it's funny you use the analogy for, a pilot and the checklist and taking flight. We have a product called Flight that actually does that in-flight campaign analysis. It says in an automated way, we take the buys, we take the traffic instructions, the air times, marry it all up like you would in a direct response campaign, but for general marketers, right? Because
Hmm.
they're doing it now too.
Yeah.
And we find all the landmines and we correct those landmines while we encounter them so that they don't persist through the end of the campaign. And then you get that, that Nielsen or that ComScore data comes in. It's like, I'm going to post. It's like, wait a second. None of this stuff ran right. Now we're on the hook for talent penalties, things like that.
Sure.
So it's like an insurance policy against your campaign to make sure that you're finding things before they persist and become an order of magnitude bigger problem that you can't solve because the campaign's over.
Because the campaign's
It's
done.
right,
What I love about this with the automation side is that so oftentimes, I mean, I'm, like John said, I'm 83 years old, so I've been in this space a while. In the Wayback Machine, you would look at metrics, but it was always a look back.
right.
What happened the last 15? Well, you can't do anything about it now because it's in the
It's
rearview mirror,
over.
right?
Yeah,
And so the idea of the automation, getting that real-time understanding, and again, new digital marketers that are now in the market, that are now working. I shouldn't say new, I should say native digital marketers are used to
right.
real-time performance in Facebook and Google Ads and being able to adjust and change and tweak things and see those changes play out in almost real time.
Yeah, yeah. And we have marketers and agencies that are merging their digital and their traditional departments together. And it's
Oh,
funny
that's
because
interesting.
when you have that convergence of teams, you find that there's frustration on both sides. It's
Hmm.
kind of like the Reese's peanut butter cup gone wrong because you've got these people, you know.
All right, I'm writing this down. Reese's peanut butter cup gone wrong dash Cordy.
Exactly. It has fangs. So, like, look, you've got digital folks who are used to this immediacy. You've got TV folks who need to get there. I think, where we fit into that model is we want TV folks to perform at digital speed. And that's what our automation's there to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we are actually, strange but true, I could talk about this stuff with you all afternoon, but we're actually at the 20-minute mark. So John, I will ask you, do you have any questions from the audience?
Guys, that flew by. Thank you. We got a few questions from the audience. Let me rip a few of them off at you. And of course, all these are mostly going to be directed towards Cordy. But Chris, if you want to jump in with that 83 years of experience, please go for it. All right, Cordy, if you had a guess, what percentage of agencies and TV stations are still using manual processes to reconcile? And why do you believe why do you believe that what do you believe the perceived hurdles are in moving to full automation?
I think it's a really good question. I don't know that I could put a hard percentage against it. Just know that there's a significant volume of agencies and sellers who are still working with PDFs, just to give you a sense of, proliferance of that kind of workflow, right? It's not moving away anytime soon. And it kind of forced us with our automation technology to go down a path of building, document conversion capabilities, just so that we can keep the machine moving. Because if you're not, look, if the whole industry isn't ready to automate and output data in a way that works for every other system to deal with, you got to step in and do something to intervene on those things, because you still have people taking all of this information from a PDF invoice, converting it into stuff that goes in for bill pay. It's like, wait a second, I can OCR that straight away and with confidence, right? Like it's not
Right.
like the old days where you had to do it 3 times, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, it's done. It's data. Put it into your match pay system and figure out what worked, what didn't. In conjunction, of course, with what we do in flight, because that's taking care of anything that could turn into a landmine for that invoice rec. But there's still a big percentage. Can't say that it's 50% or 80% or anything like that, but it's a much bigger percentage than where we see, straight automation, straight data output, and all that kind of stuff.
See, and what's funny that you say that, Cordy, is from a digital side, if you're measuring campaigns and looking at spend and invoicing a credit card, the fact that someone has a PDF and that they re-enter that data, that's ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. And what's even crazier is like technologies that kind of emerged around that process to deal with, all of those underpinnings. E-payments is a great example. I could go off on that for, an hour, but, you create virtual credit cards and it's like, I'm just going to pay for that with a virtual credit card. And,
Sure.
everything is tracked against that credit card. So now what do you do with that data? Where's that go? Right?
Right.
Like,
It's hilarious.
another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Good feedback, guys. Thank you. Let's throw out a question on the kind of the accounting side. Can you talk a little bit about data automation for media invoices and how it can alleviate both headaches and financial investments for accounting teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about your accounting team, having a bunch of billers and payers, in the back office, who are essentially rekeying data in from, external sources, whether they're PDFs or Word documents or whatnot. You've got 2 workflows to manage, right? Some stuff is coming to you electronically through EDI, and then the rest is coming through manually. So now you're training people on 2 different types of workflow. Whereas if it was all data, you train them on one thing, they hit a screen and they can look at the outcome and say, yeah, I agree, let's clear that for payment. I think, what we do, and there are other companies that do this as well, but I think what we do is interesting because we direct all of that document information straight into the media management systems that would ingest that as, EDI from sources that can send it electronically. So I think that's a big, help to a lot of the agencies that are in market doing things. And believe me, everyone is doing things manually in that regard. There's no getting away from it. We're hopeful that we can help more agencies, over the course of the next few years and fully automate the invoicing process. But until we get there, it's, right now I will convert all of your invoices into data.
Right.
Good stuff. Thank you. It seems like data automation is a natural fit for OTT, CTV, so on and so forth. However, is it much more difficult to implement for data automation for linear?
It used to be. I think, probably 4 years ago, I would have said, yeah, it's definitely, something that's hard to automate. Everyone was out and kind of building up bespoke systems to do it on the sell side and on the buy side to deal with what comes back. Having to, massage data, transpose information into formats and whatnot. It's, like I said, that goes back to that mundane. I think these days with AI and the type of technology that we build at Premium Media 360, we can do it much more quickly. And also having the 90 years of expertise in the space, that helps. Right? I am a lot older than I look.
You guys must be drinking amazing water because you're not a Camp Lejeune because you're both drinking really good water. You look great.
Right here, man.
All right, we got time for one more here, and it's a forward-thinking question. If you had to put on your predict the future hat, what does data automation look like in the next 5 years for our industry?
Well, let's play around with ChatGPT a little bit, and that's your answer, right? I mean, I can't even get access to the thing. It's always bogged down. So, I think it's a great concept. Can we apply something like that to media? Of course, it's AI.
Of course you can. The one experiment that I did, I've got this awesome cat, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna describe my cat and put my cat in a hat, a coat, wearing a sword, in a castle, as the style of a Baroque oil painting. Truly, within a minute and a half, 4 different paintings showed up, and one of them just looks like a freaking portrait of King Henry V. It's astonishing. So I think that the application of the logic can be manipulated to almost any industry, right? You know, if you want to say, I'm going to write a digital display advertisement with a headline that is, 10 words with a big image, and my industry is an ergonomic chair. Right? My hunch is that there's going to be, and it might not be the final copy, but human beings are much better editors than they are creators oftentimes. And so what it allows you to do is to have a variety of options to edit. So I think that the performance space, so not only is it generating content, but Cordy, why wouldn't it generate process?
Right. Or outcomes, or model, predict and, display what could happen if you do these things a certain way. I'm excited for it. I think, from an optimization perspective, it's what I needed 20 years ago when I was building my first optimizer, right?
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. You're like Tony Stark in the garage building your first optimizer with screwdrivers and wrenches, and now you've got some really cool technology to do it.
Exactly. I have the arc generator. I can slap that on, and here's your best media campaign.
I love it.
All righty, let me come back in and join you guys here to close this thing out. How about that button? Here we are.
There we are.
Let's come back and see Chris and Tony Stark, aka Iron Man Cordy Pascal.
That's right.
Next time I see you, Cordy, I want you to have that glowing little emblem in the center of your chest.
He's like,
I need that, and I'll grow the goatee.
He's like, I totally did it. It worked.
Dark reactor.
Well, Cordy, Chris, great conversation, phenomenal session, tons of great info. Thank you so much. And folks, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I learned a lot today. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite each and every one of you to join us for our next episode of PWMI Take 20, which is hosted on Wednesday, February 8th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I'd also like to remind you that PWMI Spring Conference, PWMI East, is scheduled from March 20th through 22nd in Miami Beach at the Eden Rock Hotel. For those of you who are planning on staying on site at the Eden Rock with us, rooms are going fast. And the deadline to take advantage of our group discounted rate, which is $329 plus tax a night, is February 20th. Go to www.thepdmi.com, get your badges, your hotel rooms today while they still last. Thanks again, everyone. We appreciate you joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, guys.